Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome everybody again to another episode of our show. Today, bringing you a really fascinating guest who is helping to create a better tomorrow for so many people. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Colonel Dr. Samantha Weeks, who is the Science and Research Mission Director of the Polaris Dawn program, which is a planned private human spaceflight mission operated by SpaceX on behalf of Shift4 Payments Chief Executive Officer Jared Isaacman, planned to launch using the Crew Dragon capsule and is the first of three planned missions in a program named the Polaris program, ultimately which endeavors to advance human spaceflight capabilities by demonstrating new technologies and conducting really extensive scientific research to help expand our knowledge of how humans adapt and ultimately live and work in space. And a lot of this research, of course, has purpose and applicability here to improve life for us terrestrial people here on Earth. Colonel Dr. Weeks, she's a retired U.S. Air Force colonel, over 2,200 hours flight time, including the F-15C, F-16, and T-38, which includes 105 combat hours. Dr. Weeks commanded at the squadron, group, and wing level in the Air Force, and today also serves as corporate vice president at Shift4 Payments, focusing on transformation and change management. And her position as science and research director with the Polaris program comes after 2.5 decades, of course, of a focus on human performance in aviation. Dr. Weeks has her Ph.D. in military strategy from the United States Air Force, Air University, her master's in human relations, University of Oklahoma, and she also did a bachelor's degree in biology at the U.S. Air Force. And we are lucky to have her. Colonel Dr. Samantha Weeks, thank you for taking the time to come on our show, and of course, thank you so much for your long service to the United States.
Well, thank you, Ira, so much for having me on today and letting me get to share some information about the Polaris program and specifically Polaris Dawn.
Awesome. Awesome. I would love, though, to start off with you because you have a fascinating background. I'd like to just spend a few minutes there, if we could, if you could talk a little bit for a few minutes about yourself, everything from where you grew up, your early interest, of course, in biology, human relations, and a bit of your journey into military service in the Air Force. I think that'd be a great way to start things off today.
Well, thanks. My story starts as a 6-year-old little girl flying home from England on a KC-135 Stratotanker. My father was an enlisted maintainer in the Air Force for 26 years, and we were living over in England where he was stationed at RAF Lakenheath. And in that summer, we flew home on this KC-135, which is kind of like a gas station in the sky and refuels other aircraft while airborne. And I was laying in the boom area looking down at the Atlantic Ocean when we did our mission that day. And our mission was to refuel 4 F-111s that were also traveling from England back to the United States. And I knew in that moment, looking down at the pilot a mere 20 feet below me, that that's what I wanted to do when I grew up. And so I went up to where my dad was sitting and told him that I knew what I wanted to be. And since it's Women's History Month, I'll kind of share this part with you. My dad asked me, do you want to be the boomer? And I said, no, I want to be that pilot. And he literally patted me on the back and said, girls don't do that. And it was 1981. And my dad is the most supportive person in my entire life, has been and always will be. But he was telling me the truth. And in 1981, women were precluded from flying combat aircraft in the United States military. But I set my eyes on the skies in that moment. And really, I would say a mantra for my life is tell me no and watch me go. And I just was determined that I would become a fighter pilot. And luckily for me, I graduated high school in 1993, the same year that Congress and the Department of Defense opened up combat cockpits to females. And so right place at the right time with a lot of hard work and determination, and entered the Air Force Academy in 1993.
Awesome. Awesome. And, you know, thinking about Polaris Dawn, but Polaris in general, you know, and obviously from the perspective of private space initiatives, we have, you know, the majority of the public has heard obviously about, well, your partner and Elon Musk at this initiative, but also I was like two dirty words, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson. We hear about the big three in that context. Could you just introduce us for a couple of minutes to who Jared Isaacman is for those that may be unaware of his background, and a little bit to how the Isaacman-Musk collaboration began to create what we hear now and we'll be talking about is the Polaris program?
Well, I can share with you what I know. Some of what you just asked, I'm not necessarily up to speed on either. But I can tell you that my introduction to Jared Isaacman came about in 2016, where I love to say that he worked for me. And he knows that I say that, and actually kind of shook his head and was like, yeah, you can say that. One of the only people who can. But he had another venture in his past called Draken International. And that was an endeavor to bring increased number of adversaries to military training. And my job at the time was the adversary tactics group commander for the United States Air Force stationed at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. And I owned the aggressors, so our training apparatus to ensure that our military is ready to fight when called upon, that involved air defense, air, space, and cyber forces. And Jared's endeavor or initiative of Draken International brought commercial adversary air to the military to increase our numbers and give us a more realistic and relevant threat to train against. And Jared kind of saw the integration efforts that we did within that. And that's kind of how I got introduced to him. And I would absolutely describe him as a visionary, and really somebody, more so than a visionary, somebody who's philanthropic in their endeavor and with their gifts, and the gifts of time, vision, initiatives, you know, to really better the world around us. And so Jared and I had mutual friends that were in our past, and most of them actually were all former Air Force Thunderbird pilots. And so we're kind of a small group, and we stay connected with an alumni. And Jared had a demonstration team in the past that he partnered with to support the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And as he went into inspiration for the first all-civilian space mission last year, he again always looks to give back to those around us. And so Inspiration4 focused with partnering on a philanthropic endeavor with St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, where they set a goal to raise over $200 million. They achieved that and surpassed it by raising over $243 million, with Jared and his wife, Monica, personally donating over 125 million of their own dollars. And I can remember in the summer of last year asking Jared how he transitioned from Make-A-Wish to St. Jude with his philanthropy. And I felt kind of dumb after I asked it, because it makes so much sense and is so simple but so profound. And he said, if we cure childhood cancer, we may not need wishes. And you're just like, damn, you're good. And so, you know, I think Jared is an adventurous, right? He has round the world records. He has a MiG-29 fighter plane. He just really is kind of adventurous and wanting to venture to new things. I'm not sure exactly what led him to space, but I can imagine that it's part of, that aspect of him. And how he specifically aligned with Elon Musk, I'm not really sure. We'd have to ask him specifically on that. But I do know that this continued venture into space is really about pushing the envelope, right? Whether it is on the ground in payments processing, in the air to bring the defense of our nation better capability, or into this space environment to rapidly advance human spaceflight capabilities and continue to push the awareness and education and book of knowledge on space biology and space medicine and space technology, and then figuring out how we can take some of that knowledge back here to improve life here on Earth. That's what Jared's all about.
Awesome. And Samantha, before we get into the really comprehensive R&D program that you're overseeing, I just wanted to ask another sort of question. If you could walk us through this. So, looking at it's a 4-person team. Jared will be the commander of the spacecraft. Lieutenant Colonel Scott Petit, who couldn't join us on this episode, hopefully join us on another. He will be the pilot. And he was the mission director of the Inspiration 4, so the first all-civilian mission. And then you have 2 other really cool people going up. You have mission specialist Sarah Gillis, who is involved in space operations at SpaceX. She will be the youngest American ever to go into orbit. She's involved in astronaut training. And then mission specialist Anna Menon, who is chief engineer of space operations at SpaceX, worked at NASA, and she has background in biomedical engineering, so obviously a really cool connection there to obviously the R&D program. Talk about, if you would, about how the team for this gets selected, what the process is and how that all gets put together, if you would.
Again, some of the inner workings, I'm not necessarily privy to, but what I can share from my understanding is really finding the right people for the mission set. In this case, Jared has these Dragon missions or Starship mission for the 3rd Polaris program mission. And he wants to, again, evolve, the knowledge base of this. And so as he's going back up into space on Polaris Dawn in the Dragon capsule, Sarah Gillis's selection makes complete sense in my mind, right? She's the lead space operations engineer at SpaceX, responsible for the company's astronaut training program. And what better opportunity than say, hey, let's go show you what you instruct on a day in and day out basis so that you can come back to SpaceX and actually give a personal experience to the training that you provide any type of SpaceX customer, whether that be the Polaris program or Axiom or our NASA astronauts that are utilizing Dragon right now. And so this is the opportunity to grow the knowledge and capacity firsthand through the Polaris program for SpaceX, with their own astronauts now having that experience in Sarah and Anna.
Awesome. Now, Samantha, you are heading up science and research as the director of the Polaris Dawn Initiative. You have a very broad biologic research and human performance itinerary here. I think a little bit about the NASA twin study with brothers Mark and Scott Kelly and some of the things that have been going on there the last couple of years. But you really are going quite broad in the sense of physiological things you're going to be looking at in terms of venous gas emboli, how radiation affects various human biologic systems, things with Neuro-Ocular syndrome, multi-omics and out. Really very comprehensive. Talk about the program, obviously we see a tremendous amount of connections here to everything down on the terrestrial side, but talk about how you put the program together, what was involved, and some of how all this is obviously Sarah and Anna are going to be up there carrying out most of this, but talk a little bit about your role and ultimately how this whole program gets put together.
So Jared came to me and asked me if I would support the Polaris program as a mission director. And of course, as a former fighter pilot who's dreamt of space also like most of us, it was an easy, absolutely. Now let me go home and make sure my husband's on board too, which he responded with, you said yes, right? And then as we got into what our specific roles would be, I couldn't have asked for a better role than science and research. My whole life, I've been intrigued by biology, and specifically space biology, space medicine, and genetics. And so the idea that I get to go really reach out across the globe to academia and research institutions to really kind of see what they have on the shelf or in development that we could take up into space to execute on their behalf and bring back to grow that body of knowledge is just amazing. And I was pre-med at the Air Force Academy and kind of had to choose my junior year. Should I try for pilot training or should I try for medical school? And it kind of came down to 8. You could always go back to medical school, but at the time you had to be 27 in order to go to flight training in the Air Force. And so I was like, I'll just go to medical school when I retire. Well, I'm now retired. I'm 46 and there's zero chance that I'm going to medical school because it's way too hard of an endeavor for me at this point in my life. But this is just great. And what we've done is really just cast a wide net across institutions to say, who's interested? What do you have? And how can we support your research activities? And it really does. The mission profile allows us to kind of jump into some new areas, such as attempting the first ever commercial spacewalk with a SpaceX designed extra vehicle activity spacesuit that's going to be upgraded from their current IVA or intra-vehicle spacesuit. We're also going to try to gather data on the radiation environment, as you said, by reaching an apogee of approximately 1,400 kilometers and approaching the inner Van Allen radiation belts, which will provide substantive research to humankind on the space environment and radiation from a technological and a human performance and body standpoint, as well as some of the other things that you already discussed. But really, we're just reaching out to institutions to see how we can support through this mission in order to grow knowledge. And obviously, as you know, a lot of the radiation and human genomics projects that can occur in space give us applicability back here on Earth within genes, additions, deletions, mutations, as well as developing mitigation medicines and technologies, to counteract those, whether it be in geriatric patients here on Earth or to space exploration as we go further and farther back to the moon and beyond to Mars.
And connecting to that, I obviously have a very comprehensive list of partnerships here: Weill Cornell Medical Center, the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, so forth. And they're going to be doing a lot of the, translating, as you were saying, that research that you do up there, down here, not just for obviously Moon and Mars, but how things apply down here. What are some of the, obviously, these are some of the folks you're working with. I'm sure you get a lot of other people contacting you that want to put stuff on the ships and have you do experiments and so forth. Any other interesting things you can highlight in terms of whether it's cancer research or growing organs or whatever it may be that we need to think about for the long term, and when people are out there at the new moon base or Mars or whatever it's going to be, things that get you really excited looking out in the next, say, couple decades?
Yeah, we're still honestly in some of the gathering opportunities that are out there, and kind of our priorities that we're looking at are impact on deep space exploration, support of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and their global health initiative, supporting betterment of life here on Earth. And then obviously we want human involvement. So we want the astronauts involved in executing these missions or these experiments, not necessarily have purely autonomous things that just are going for a ride. And then the last and very significant aspect that we have to focus on is the Dragon technical requirements and ensuring that any type of experiment is safe to fly and safe to be in that environment. But we are casting a wide net, looking at, as I talked about, radiation genomics experiments up in space, antibiotic effectiveness experiments, and then really understanding, as you pointed out, physical adaptation of the human body in short-term and long-term environments in space and how that can do it. And I will say there are huge protocols to get to for approval to do some of these. And so right now we are just looking into what is in the realm of possible and then working through all of the approval processes. But one thing that we are setting the bar high for and hope that we can achieve approval is an invasive intracranial pressure experiment.
Cool.
And, you know, we're going to kind of leave it at that because there is so much approval requirements that are done. But if we could receive that approval and do that on the Polaris program, it would be one of the most informative and groundbreaking experiments that's been conducted on the human body in space. Other things that we're looking at, as you did point out, you know, is cellular biomarkers of radiation exposure to understand that, as well as one of the, you know, interesting aspects that we could take from space and bring back here to Earth is potential research and understanding anemia and how it occurs in space, and then how different environments for types of patients experience similar effects, and then how we can develop mitigation techniques to better that for people who potentially, for example, have long-term bed rest and things of that nature. And so, you know, we are trying to really just figure out what's in the realm of possible. And again, the greatest part of the Polaris program is it's not necessarily one mission. So by starting these conversations across academia and institutions today, we can also further develop the next Polaris mission, science and research objectives, and experiments that might need longer lead times.
Outstanding. Really cool. One other thing I'll just take off this list, Samantha, it's sort of, you know, obviously there's a lot of the human performance and biology on here, but there is, you know, one of the line items is becoming the first crew to test the Starlink laser-based communication in space for ultimately studying human space-flight communications, moon, Mars, beyond. Can you say a few words about that? Because, I mean, obviously Starlink has been an important topic. For SpaceX, it's been in the news everywhere, obviously, with the Ukraine situation and all that. Can you just say a few words about what you're going to be doing with the Starlink?
Well, right now we're still trying to finalize what that part of the mission profile looks like and what will be the best use of it. But absolutely, as you said, the Starlink constellation is a laser-based communication that, again, is going to provide twofold technology. As we have Artemis missions that are going to go to the moon, that Starlink communication constellation will support those endeavors, as well as getting to Mars. I would venture to guess, without a doubt, SpaceX will, you know, be well on its way within this decade to do that. But then using that constellation to bring communication at the speed of lasers across the globe, right? As we saw within Ukraine, or as we can envision it and imagine it in more remote parts of the globe that don't necessarily have that connectivity. How can we utilize Starlink to, you know, bring people together from the United States to, you know, somewhere in a very remote aspect of the globe today, to potentially bring the latest medical technology and efforts and doctors to them.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I see, you know, the connections to things like telemedicine and telesurgery, especially, you know, long distance. Someone has to have a a transplant or something on Mars. I mean, yeah, I mean, all this stuff is, it's so, seeing you say, it's all about the future coming together. And obviously programs like this are what is ultimately going to allow us to learn what it's going to take to make it happen. So this is really exciting.
I heard Elon Musk say when he was down at Starbase in February that, I don't know if he said it was his goal, but what he said was, we are making science fiction reality. And I couldn't find more succinct, better words to really describe my exposure to SpaceX and what they're trying to achieve. And without a doubt, there's a lot of accuracy in that comment. And this is just one aspect where maybe the Polaris program can have a portion and a part to support that and really just take us to truly the 21st century as we all envisioned reading about it, 40, 50, 60 years ago.
Yep, absolutely. Samantha, you, as I mentioned in the intro, I mean, you studied biology. We're going to head towards into pre-med at one point. You've studied human relations, obviously military strategy at the Air Force Academy. For the next sort of generation that's going to be listening to this show, that wants to follow, obviously, in your footsteps, and really, obviously we hear the mention space tech is obviously a hot area. Can you give a little message to sort of that next generation that's coming along, what they should be doing, what they should be studying, suggestions from your own career path, if they want to be the next mission director or they want to be on the next Dragon capsule at some point. Talk a little bit to that next generation that may be listening to the show of STEM thought leaders.
I hate to sound cliche, but really, short and sweet and to the point is probably where it's at, right? The first thing that I would tell people in a younger generation about their future is to believe in themselves. I would tell you the confidence that I had in my first 25 years of life was more significant than the confidence that I've had in my last 20 years of life. And I just feel like the world around you kind of wears you down at some points in time, and you start to doubt yourself and you doubt your ability. And so I would tell the younger generation to continue to believe in themselves. Believe that they are that superhero that can accomplish anything type of thing, and hold on to that as those people or environments around them try to put no's in their ways that they see as insurmountable. And then I would really tell them to build upon that believing in you. Don't take no for an answer. Whenever you have those obstacles around you, figure out a way to go over, under, around, or through them. Because that's what grit is all about. And Angela Duckworth talks about grit as passion and perseverance for a singularly focused goal. And I kind of took this GBU aspect from Jared of good, bads, and uglies. We are all going to have good, bads, and uglies in our life. And you're not alone when you go through a bad or an ugly. Mm-hmm. So you really just have to see that as your grit growing moment. And stay focused on what you endeavor to achieve. And setting the bar high is great. You may not achieve it all the time, but you're going to get a lot further than if you set the bar low and easy to succeed type of levels. So believing in you and growing your grit are probably the two things that I would tell people, as they step out into their future. If I had taken no from my dad at a 6-year-old, I wouldn't have been a fighter pilot. If I had taken no from my operations group commander in 2005, I wouldn't have applied for the Thunderbirds and even met Kid Poteet, who's going to be the Polaris on mission pilot. And so, the whole tell me no and watch me go concept, I would tell everybody to kind of, embrace that and prove the world around them wrong.
Awesome message. Awesome message. So in addition to, so we talked about Jared, we talked about your dad, your operations director in the Air Force, other mentors, anyone else that while we have you that have really been instrumental, whether it's from the military, from your time in private industry, from your collaborations with academia, any other people that you want to mention that have been really inspirational for you and really sort of a mentorship role as you have developed throughout this amazing career?
Yeah, I would say that my first mentor is a man named Dave Robinson, who I met at an air show in 2007. He had been a Thunderbird also earlier on in his career. And when I met him, he was a 2-star general. And he told me to contact him within a week after us meeting, because we had struck up a conversation. And it was just one of those good kind of philosophical discussions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't write him back, right? I don't write generals back. I'm just a major, I think at the time, just trying to do my job. And about 10 days later, I get an email from him that says, you missed your deadline. It's not really good to blow off general officers and miss suspenses. And I kind of did. And he walked through this whole list of attributes and kind of who I am, and said, let's figure out who Combo's mentor would be. Enlisted, female officer, fighter pilot, academy grad, Thunderbird, and kind of showed me that my opportunities to find somebody to mentor me who looked like me was very small. And the bottom line of that email, as I remember, it says, sometimes your mentor picks you and sometimes you pick your mentor. And Dave has been part of my life since that happenstance meeting in 2007, as well as then getting to meet and be mentored by his wife, General Lori Robinson, who was the first female in the United States military to be a combatant commander. And so through their tutelage and relationships, I have definitely grown. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing that I would give Dave in that whole interaction is more the allyship aspect of it. I didn't really have the opportunity to look up and find a female fighter pilot to be mentored by, but Dave chose to mentor somebody who had some similar experiences but looked absolutely different. And he didn't have to mentor me. Mm-hmm. But he chose to kind of look and give back to the next generation and see where he could make a difference. And I think allyship is a very important aspect for our society, whether in the military, in industry, or in academia, of how we can grow the next generation to reach its full potential, realizing that we need diversity in thought, perspective, and every other aspect that diversity covers to truly find the talent to push the organization furthest and farthest into the best that it can be. Another mentor that I want to highlight is another retired 4-star general, but he's in the Army. And so it's General Charles H. Jacoby Jr. And I got to work for him at NORAD, U.S. Northern Command in Colorado Springs in 2003 through 2015. And I would say that the biggest lesson he taught me was that relationships are truly what make the world go round. Mm-hmm. And he called it a center of gravity. And from 2 military people who have studied strategy, we had great sidebar discussion on Clausewitz and centers of gravity. And it ended with, sir, you're smart, I'm dumb, sir, you're right, I'm wrong, because he's spot on. Relationships truly are the center of gravity, and every single thing we try to accomplish in life typically involve other people. Even Jared's endeavor to go into space involves partnership with SpaceX. Mm-hmm. And so realizing how we're all interconnected and need one another, and how we form and build trusted relationships and partnerships are what is going to allow us individually and collectively solve the world's problems. Mm-hmm. And envision what tomorrow is going to hold so that we can anticipate it and innovate to be ready and prepared to maximize our future.
Awesome message. Samantha, say if you would, a couple words about your work with the International Women's Forum as we're discussing equality here.
So this is a great opportunity too. And I'm glad you asked about it, because I would say my last mentor came from the International Women's Forum. And how did I get, the exposure to this? The International Women's Forum came out of the 1970s Glass Ceiling Commission. And it is an organization that really endeavors to connect women leaders across the professional sector to support each other from the commission and mission of advancing women's leadership and championing equality worldwide. And so I was asked by the Air Force if I wanted to and would apply to be part of their fellowship program in 2020. And so I applied, or 2019. So I applied in June of that, interviewed, and was selected to be part of the fellows program from 2019 to 2020. It's actually going to conclude for my cohort this year in May with our week at Harvard, which has been postponed due to COVID. But it has been an amazing opportunity to connect with women, not only from the US industry perspective, but really truly across the globe. And our first opportunity as a cohort was in Canada during that year's national convention. And we have the opportunity to interact with women who are inventors, entrepreneurs, CEOs, heads of states, astronauts, scientists, athletes. And it really just is unique for me, considering the majority of my career prior to this point has revolved in a male-dominated environment, to suddenly see such successful women, and really women who look to support and uplift others. I'll go to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I won't necessarily get the quote right, but she challenged women to uplift one another, right? And to support each other, and to find how we grow together through the success of each other, rather than see kind of a competition amongst women as we grow into leadership, or as we grow into typically male-dominated societies. And my mentor there of Sue Rankin is just a phenomenal woman. And I randomly met her at that convention, and she has been an executive coach and a friend to me. And without IWF, I wouldn't necessarily have seen all the potential and opportunity for women really to connect and support each other.
Wonderful. Samantha, one last thing I neglected. I mean, I introduced you at the beginning as Colonel Dr. Samantha Weeks. I dropped by accident I said the handle, which is combo. Could you just tell us where that handle comes from for your Air Force experience, if you're allowed to?
Yeah, of course I can. Fighter pilots get call signs, and I would say typically you earn your call sign by something you did or did not do. And I'm no different to that. And so I received my call sign in my first fighter squadron, the 94th Fighter Squadron at Langley Air Force Base, Virginia, which happens to be the second oldest fighter squadron in history. And my call sign of combo really comes from having the right combination of sass and determination. And sass is probably synonymous with saying having a big mouth and using it often. And that's probably true for me as a 6-year-old and true for me as a 46-year-old. And, people often in my civilian life now will ask me if somebody refers to me as combo, like, where's that? What is that? And is it okay if I call you it? And it's kind of crazy to say, but for the past 25 years, I've been referred to and responded to combo more than I have Sam or Samantha. And so when somebody calls me Samantha, I definitely probably am taken aback and hear my mom, who's in heaven, scolding me as usual. So combo weeks is definitely who I am, and embrace all aspects of being the right combination of sass and determination for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it's you clearly are bringing that determination to this program, and it's just really a fascinating itinerary that you have laid out. Really wishing you the best, not just obviously this program, but everything else you're going to be doing connected to it. For everybody that is going to be listening to this episode across our different podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, you have been listening to Colonel Dr. Samantha Combo Weeks, Science and Research Mission Director of the Polaris Dawn program. Combo, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come on our show. Obviously, thank you for everything you're doing there, not just for obviously on space, but for all of us down here on Earth. And as we like to say on this show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow through everything you're doing. It's really an amazing story, and thank you for joining us.
Well, Ira, thanks for the opportunity. And I'll tell you, we'd love to come back as we finalize the science and research that we'll execute on Polaris Dawn and give you more of those specifics, for all of your listeners and watchers who are following along. And definitely go check out polarisprogram.com to see everything that we're up to, and follow us on social media.
Absolutely. We will put all that information into the bio of the show, so everyone can definitely follow you, and we'd love to have you back, and other members of the team as well. But really, really great having you.
Yeah, thank you again.